Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Shriners Initial Research Show. Apologies for the delay to the show tonight. My system crashed. As soon as I tried to get everything going, computer decided to crash. But that's pretty much a summation of my weekend. Hopefully yours was pretty good. Hope you had a lot of Mackenzie Hughes, a lot of Sepp Straka, who I was pretty wary of in terms of me not using him. I recommended that you should probably think long and hard about using him since he is the number one putter on fast and lightning Bermuda greens. Turns out that he played extremely well, was putting it well. Mackenzie Hughes also played well. So hope you had a lot of them. Hope you had Mackenzie Hughes outright. I do want to hear from you all. How did your weekend go? Mine was unlucky, I'd like to say, but overall was not a very positive week. Emiliano Grillo's triple on 14 was kind of the hammer in the nail in the coffin of my week. And then Friday, I didn't get any sixes through. It was comical of me looking up. Well, another one bites the dust, and another one bites the dust, and one player here, one player there, shouldas and couldas and wouldas, and 3 days later, it's a losing weekend. But we move on to Las Vegas, where we are at TPC Summerlin for the Shriners, a pretty big event in the fall. A lot of bigger names come to this event, and you'll see some of them here shortly. But let's get into what we're really here for, which is the Shriners research. So, all statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler and much better DFS player. Go check them out. It's well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media: Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and Discord server. Reminder, tomorrow I will be live on Twitch in the morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 10 to 10:30. I can't remember what I said is my usual time, but it is somewhere in between 10 and 10:30 a.m. Eastern. I will be going back and checking my performance at the Sanderson Farms, that data model. I will be doing research around the course and the previous winners for the Shriners. Lots of good stuff. So if you are interested in seeing that, drop on by on Twitch with the link in the description. It's a laid-back show. You have opportunity to ask questions and get a feel for a lot of the inner workings or behind the scenes of how I do my analysis and such. And then Instagram and Twitter is where I post the results of that research. Usually little nuggets and whatnot of information. So if you want to see just the finalization of that research, give me a follow at the links in the description to the social media. And then finally, overall in this intro, we're live, chat's open. I mentioned it. I want to hear from you all. How did your weekend go? Did you have Mackenzie Hughes? With those who joined me on Friday morning for the showdown stream, how did those lineups go? I want to hear from you all on that, considering a lot of the players that I was talking about ended up playing very, very well on Friday and into the weekend, but with a showdown being just Friday. Curious to hear how that went, so put it in the comments or jump in chat. But yeah, let's see if we can't move forward and get a bit better of a week, at least on my end, this week as we do our initial research for the 2023 Shriners. And we move over to what is Fantasy National. As you can see, I was doing a whole lot of testing heading into this show since my computer crashed. But this is last year's tournament fact sheet. Last I saw, about 15-20 minutes ago, this year's Shriners GCSAA tournament fact sheet was not out yet, so we use last year's, and TPC Summerlin hasn't really changed much over the years, so this should be pretty darn close to what we will get tomorrow for the GCSA tournament fact sheet for this year's tournament. However, I will always bring that up to start the Data Dive show since we don't have it tonight. But just to get an idea of how TPC Summerlin is laid out, it is a par 71 at 7,255 yards. As I mentioned, we are in Las Vegas, Nevada. Bit of fairway, a lot of rough, but it's short. It's not very hard to play out of. So another one of these tournaments where you will see fairways be less hit, but it is not an indication of the difficulty of the tournament or the difficulty of hitting the fairways in general. Guys just realize or know that the rough isn't hard to play out of, so they generally just try to hit it further and they don't care about layups. Quite a few bunkers in play at TPC Summerlin. 4 holes with water in play. We are on bent grass greens with Bermuda around the rest of the course, fairways and rough. I think that's pretty much what we need to know. There's nothing to do with course architect information. Bobby Weed is the original architect for TPC Summerlin, so nothing to do there in Fantasy National. Really not a lot to do with length of course either. Not the over or under or short or long. Plays right in the middle of average. Green sizes, I think I skipped that. These are really large greens. 7,400 square feet on average, which the average tour green is 6,000 square feet, so much larger here at TPC Summerlin. So greens in regulation data might not be the most useful since greens are just larger and easier to hit here. But that is a look at TPC Summerlin from a tournament fact sheet perspective. Now we'll move over to Fantasy National and get a feel for the players who are in the field this week at the Shriners. And a lot of the bigger names, the biggest name there, Patrick Cantley. He has played this event extremely well. Sungjae is your defending champion. Max Homa. Tom Kim is here. Cam Davis. Quite a few of the President's Cup players, 4 or 5 are here. Lots of players that have traditionally played well. Eastlake, Aaron Wise, JT Poston, Taylor Pendrith. So it's a pretty big event here in the fall. One where the bigger names are attracted to. A lot of the what am I trying to say? How am I trying to say this? This is one of the tournaments that the bigger names do consider coming to. Not all of them come here, but it's usually a pretty good field in the fall event schedule. So here's a look at some of the names that are here. We saw just that the greens are bent. We don't have any idea on speed yet until we go through the course breakdown, but just to get a feel for the top bent putters, and I'm actually going to move this back to May the 1st. May the 1st will include this year's Wells Fargo, which was at TPC Potomac, which is also bent. Let's see, there should be, yeah, you see Adams Vincent played a whole lot on bent. So your top strokes gained putters, or top putters on bent surfaces. No speed filters just yet. Right here. No speed filters just yet. But your top putters, Christian Bezainhout, Denny McCarthy, Brendan Todd, Justin Lauer, Austin Cook, Bo Hostler, Max Homa, Maverick McNeely, Patrick Cantley, and Patrick Rogers. We'll see if that changes here after we check the historic conditions, because I think they're all fast, but I could be wrong about that, and that's why we check it. Let me center the camera again, because since my computer crashed, it likes to reset and do all sorts of crazy stuff. All right, so let's move to the course breakdown here at Fantasy National. And what we have here is a course that has one, maybe two really challenging holes, and then the rest of the course is gettable. Really, really gettable. So again, what I like to do, 9th and 10th toughest holes, if they are sandwiching par, then it's it's right at average. Well, 9th still plays under par. 8th is right at par, so that would indicate perhaps slightly easier than an average course or average difficulty tournament. You've got one hole, the long par 4 third, that plays to 2/10 over par, and it is a difficult hole. But then you go all the way down to 12 hundredths, and then a 10th and whatnot. So it drops off in terms of difficulty very quickly, whereas the 18th toughest hole plays to a half a shot under par, almost a half a shot under par, 4/10 under par. You see there's a 2% eagle rate on this par 4, drivable par 4. 4/10 of a shot under par. I mean, you just got a lot of holes that are scoreable here. So that should give you an indication of how scoring goes at this tournament. It's generally pretty low. Let's move on down to the strokes gained by shot type. For the top 10s, we're back to a somewhat normal-ish distribution, with approach more than putting, and then around the green and off the tee vary depending on the course. Still slightly favors ball striking just due to the approach, but around the green does matter a little bit here. We move to the top 5s. You can see that the two main shot types really distance themselves, but off the tee and around the green are still fairly close to each other. Off the tee actually overtakes around the green in terms of performance for top 5s. And if you look at the winners, again, more putting, but the emphasis here is on the off the tee. So your winners are gaining more off the tee than their peers that are finishing just under them in the leaderboard. So, 65 hundredths, 0.64 or 65 here, 1.16. The putters, or the winners, 1.5 essentially with the putting. So it's going to look like it's an evenly distributed course between ball striking and short game. Quite misleading. It is a ball strikers course because of off the tee, especially for the winners. Like, again, off the tee for the top 5s, slightly ahead, and then for the top 10, the around the green edges it ever so slightly, but it's still an approach off the tee, and then if you're making putts, you're winning type tournament. So, strokes gained by hole by par. The 3 easiest holes, actually I think the par 4, the drivable par 4 is actually the 3rd easiest hole. But 3 of the 4 easiest holes here are on the par 5, so this should be no surprise here. 0.16, 0.14, and 0.11. Top 5s, 0.18, 0.16, 0.14, so the par 3s are catching up slightly, but they're still catching up. And then we go to the winners. The par 5s really take off. Again, 3 of the 4 easiest holes here. You have to score on the par 5s here. Par 3s are pretty important here at TPC Summerlin, at least in regards to, or in relation to the par 4s. We'll see if they are important in terms of overall compared to the rest of the full field courses on the PGA Tour later in XL. But at least in terms of the par 4s here at TPC Summerlin, these two are roughly the same in terms of importance. So I'm going to bring this back to the top 10s. Hole composition, the majority of your par 4s here come from 400 to 450. You do have 3 450 to 500, and then 2 short ones, including the 1 drivable par 4. The par 3s fairly evenly split between short, medium, and very long. So there's no 200 to 225 on the scorecard. but we've seen how that can be misleading, at least, especially in the first two tournaments, where the Sanderson Farms had a par 5 that didn't measure on the scorecard over 600 plus, and yet we had data in there. The Fortinet had some examples like that. So par 3s fairly evenly distributed, so we'll see if any of these ranges matter over the other. And then the par 5s, 2 550 to 600, and then 1 600 to 650. The yardage here does not play long. Again, in Vegas, the ball travels further. It does not play to 7,200 yards. It will play like a short course, although I will not be using short course metrics. It will play like a short course. Pro shot distribution, again, the majority come from 200 plus. We'll see if that is a predominant factor, 200 plus approaches, especially considering how important the par 5s are. The biggest difference here in relation to the PGA Tour is probably the 125 to 150, or PGA Tour average, I should say, is 125 to 150. So we'll see if that is an indicator in terms of success. A lot to do in the data dive tomorrow, and I'll be doing a little bit of that tomorrow at Twitch. So again, subtle reminder. Now it's not so subtle, but a reminder that I'll be live on Twitch. If you want to see a lot of the inner workings, drop by. Historic cut line here. It has varied greatly, including getting all the way to +2 in 2018. But since then, it has dropped dramatically, including a -6 in 2021. That is astronomically low. I don't know if I've ever seen a cut in a regular PGA Tour event be that low. So that tells you just how easy this tournament has been, or course has been, the last 3 years. I mean, last year was -4, and then -6, -4, -2 the year before that. It has been an easy course. And you can see that here in the scoring distribution. You have 23.5% birdies. You only have 12.5% doubles, 12.5% bogeys, so almost double the birdies and bogeys. You do have a couple of holes that can jump up and get you. We mentioned the par 4 third. There's another one on the back 9, I believe. I'm going to cheat. Yeah, the par 3 17th. This plays to a 10th of a shot over par. So, I mean, there are a couple of holes that can get you, especially with water in play. But generally speaking, a lot more birdies than bogeys, and then you stack the doubles on top, and you're still looking at a 23.5 versus, what's this, 12.5 plus 1.5, so 14. So 23.5 to 14 birdies to bogeys, and then you can actually see a little bit of the Eagles chart as well. So very, very easy course. Driving accuracy, again, I mentioned it, that the players know that the rough isn't penal. The ball travels further anyway here in Vegas. Driving accuracy is going to be lower. Green regulation percentage, again, mentioned this when we were talking through the GCSA tournament fact sheet. The greens are very large here, so green in regulation percentage is much higher here. Players do not scramble well here, so that might be something we want to look at and see if a player can scramble. Maybe that could be a small factor. I tend to not think so, since the course is so easy that if you're scrambling for pars, you're just losing that much more to the field. But I mean, like I said, there are a couple holes if you're able to scramble on the par 4 third, perhaps scramble on the par 3 and whatnot. So we might take a look. I have my doubts that this is going to be important, but for your information, players are much less successful scrambling here than the average tour event. 3 putts per round, slightly lower than field average, than tour average. I'll be interested to see how the putting metrics played out for the Sanderson Farms tomorrow. See if my 10% in or split out between 3 putts and putts 10 to 15 feet worked out. So I'm quite curious to see that tomorrow on Twitch. Driving distance, I've mentioned it all show, it seems like. A lot further here. Average of 296 here at TBC Summerlin. Average tour event 282. Again, guys just don't care. The rough is not penal. The ball travels further here anyway. There you go. And then lastly, green regulation proximity is much further away. Again, just due to the fact that these greens are large. So almost 31.2 feet, or just over 31 feet away from the hole. Average green or average proximity here at TBC Summerlin versus 29 at the average tour event. So there is a look at TBC Summerlin from a graphical and scorecard view. I'm going to keep that open. Let's go quickly to the historic conditions. And last year played the average speed. So average speed bent greens. Then there were quite a few years of fast, average, fast. So there's not really a consistent speed filter that we can look at. For example, the Sanderson Farms has always been fast and even a little bit of lightning. The Fortinet has always had fast bent greens. So I'm not sure we're going to have any speed filters this week in terms of bent green surfaces and putting rankings and all that stuff. So I might keep it at just the bent for now that I showed you before we went to the course breakdown. Just to give you that list one more time, your best performers since May the 1st on bent surfaces, no speed filters included. I think it's just getting cut off. Yep, that's the rough. Speed's down here. There we go, Nick. No speed filter, just bent. Your top 10 putters are Christian Bezadenhout, Denny McCarthy, Brendan Todd, Justin Lauer, Austin Cook, Bo Hostler, Max Homa, Maverick McNeely, Patrick Hanley, and Patrick Rogers. So we're not going to be looking at any short course metrics. Again, it's probably going to play or feel like it's short, but the course is still 7,255 yards, so I don't want to look at any short course metrics. It's not, obviously it's not long. We'll check wind throughout the week. I'm not going to do so this on a Sunday, this far out from the tournament, even though if we looked at Wind Finder, I'm sure what it says right now will be exactly the same. Weather never changes from forecasts. No green speeds, rough length, not really, but there is a quite clear filter that we look at here at the Shriners. It's easy, just like we did for the Sanderson Farms. Scoring relative to par, easy. I'm going to back this out to January 1st so we have enough rounds for players. Since the start of this calendar year, your top performers in rounds that are easy: Patrick Cantlay, Tom Kim, Seamus Power, Mark Hubbard, Davis Riley, Cam Davis, Adam Svensson, Ryan Palmer, Maverick McNeely, and David Lipsky. So let's see, players that played. I know Svensson played well this weekend. I didn't see where he ended up. Davis Riley was playing very well. He was another person that really killed me today. He tanked my DFS teams a little bit. He was a long shot to win the tournament. I had an outright ticket on him, but he really tanked my DFS teams. Seamus Power, I don't remember how I think he might have missed the cut, but I mean, Mark Hubbard, the 54-hole leader, played extremely well this past weekend. So you can see these guys that are generally really, really good when it's easy. Minus the person that I was the highest on. He just sucked this week. No other way to put it. He sucked. So yeah, there is a look at the players that perform best when a round is easy. Let's get a feel for some of these other metrics here. Let's take a look at off the tee. And actually, I'm going to keep off the tee and the easy scoring relative to par. Just kind of a gut feeling here. It's always very easy here. We saw that off the tee increased in importance as you rose in the leaderboard or rose on the leaderboard. So your top performers in off the tee when a round is easy. Those players are Sung Jae, Ryan Palmer, Cameron Champ, Keith Mitchell, Taylor Pendrith, Patrick Cantley, Taylor Moore, Troy Merritt, Hayden Buckley, Chris Kirk, and Maverick McNeely. So a little bit of overlap here. You've got McNeely, Taylor Moore was up there in terms of strokes gained total, or he was close to it. Cantley, obviously. Ryan Palmer. Let's see. This would explain a whole lot. Like Sung Jae's the defending champion. Makes a lot of sense. We'll see how well Patrick Cantley has played this tournament. Spoiler, it's very, very good. He's played it very, very well in the past. Some others here, like Davis Riley, he was 5th in strokes gained total, 12th off the tee. So a lot of overlap here between these players. I am going to remove the easy filter. Let's bring this data back in a little bit to June 1st. Let's take a look at your best iron players in that time frame. Your best strokes gained approach players since June 1st. Tom Kim, Ches Reavie, Lee Hodges, Mark Hubbard, Adam Schenk, Chesson Hadley, Stefan Jaeger, Patrick Cantley, Sung Jae, Cam Davis, Martin Laird. So again, just guys that are playing well. Mark Hubbard, Tom Kim. Hadley was, I think he missed the cut this week. He missed the cut at the Fortinet. I think he might have made the cut this week, but it was a poor finish. Jaeger was doing very well, and then Saturday happened. Cantley, M, Davis, these President's Cup players. There's Matthias Schmid, who I've been very, very high on. Taylor Pendrith, Trey Molinek. So, again, strokes gained approach, it might not be as important as it is at other times in the PGA Tour season. Fortinet, Sanderson Farms, even to a lesser extent, the Shriners is more about putting, but approach is always going to be a factor. How much of a factor is varied between course to course, but it's always going to be a factor. Let's see. Let's move on to birdies and bogeys just very quickly. Let's take a look at birdies gained, and again, as we did with the Sanderson Farms, we know it's going to be easy. So let's take a look and get a feel for who are the best birdies or better players since January 1st. So when a round is easy, dating back to January 1st, your top birdies or better gained players: Ryan Palmer, Patrick Cantley, Tom Kim, Davis Riley, Adam Svensson, Michael Thompson, Emiliano Grillo, Matthias Schmid, Troy Merritt, and Cam Davis. Again, a lot of overlap here, whether it's strokes gained total, strokes gained off the tee, all that stuff in terms of performance when it's easy. Don't want to get too much further into it. Instead, let's go and look at the historic conditions in a more full picture. So you can see all but one round in the past 2 years is played easy. The other one played average. Every round before that was easy the previous year. So you have to go back to 2018 when that cut was plus whatever it was, 2 maybe? I'm going to cheat again. Yeah, plus 2 in 2018. That was the only time it was ever over par. And that's probably why round 2 was very windy. So it looks like they had a lot of wind that week altogether. So that would probably explain why this was difficult that year. But otherwise, easy. For whatever reason, Summerlin was classified as Bermuda last year, but it has always been bent. So I'm going on the bent. I'm going on the bent. I don't know what or why Fantasy National has it labeled as Bermuda last year. I'm just going on bent. Hitting fairways has generally been somewhat average to difficult. It's actually gotten easier over the years. So maybe difficult fairways aren't a thing, or aren't as much of a thing here anymore. Greens have generally been pretty receptive. Rough length I've mentioned is not penal at all. The last 3 years, it's always played short. Green speeds have varied between average and fast, so I'm not sure I'm going to put a speed filter on it. We'll see. And then the course has played mainly in the 72 to 7400 range. You did have one full year in 2020 where it was short, but for the most part it is played to average length. So there's a look at the historic conditions for the Shriners. Let's take a look at who has played this event well and who hasn't. So in the past 5 years, dating back to 2018, Patrick Cantlay is your #1 total strokes gained player, and he hasn't even played every year. You see this performance: T8, runner-up, winner. That's pretty strong. Now, if you want to be contrarian, you can say, well, he's getting worse every year, so, maybe he only top 15s this year. I mean, he is getting worse. But he has played this event extremely well. Very, very clearly the favorite here this week. Sung Jae, no slouch either. 3 finishes, all inside the top 15. The defending champion, I expect him to be a factor this week as well. Party Marty, your winner in 2021, 4 for 5. Does have a missed cut, but 4 for 5. Chesson Hadley, 4 for 5. Adam Shank, 4 for 5. Adam Hadwin, 3 for 3. Bo Hostler, 4 for 4. Get off there. Sneesmith, 3 for 3, who had a huge charge today at the Sanderson Farms. He went -8 today. Really shot up the leaderboard. Spawn, Aaron Wise. So you see some of these guys that have played this event very well. Wise, strokes gain approach. Neesmith, all strokes gain approach. Hostler's more putting. Hadwin's certainly more putting. Party Marty is all ball striking. Sung Jae, pretty well rounded, but best at iron play. So even though putting was so astronomically important throughout all the top 10s, the top 5s, and the winners, you still have your strokes gain approach players. You still have your strokes gain off the tee guys. It is important here. So there's a look at the players who have played this event well. And then at the other end of the spectrum, players that haven't played this event well, you got Tyler Duncan, 0 for 3. Nick Watney, 2 for 5, but a clunker of a miscut. He does have a top 30, but 3 miscuts. Max Homa, surprising to see. He's 0 for 3 here at TBC Summerlin. Patrick Rogers, 1 for 4. Kevin Streelman is 3 for 5 in making the cut, but nothing better than a T47. So he's really struggled here. Knox, 2 for 4. Keith Mitchell, 0 for 4. So a little bit surprising to see that, considering he's a ball striker. But generally speaking, I would think Keith Mitchell is better when it's difficult as opposed to easy. Yeah. So that explains Keith Mitchell here and his relative lack of success, as he is very, very good when it's difficult. So, what did I just do? I think I just did the wrong thing. I did, because I'm an idiot. All right. Let's see. Others here. We mentioned Streelman, Keith Mitchell, McNeely, 1 for 4. Bryce Garnett, 1 for 4. Surprising to see Charlie Hoffman. He's 3 for 4 with a top 20, but he's still negative in terms of total. KH Lee, 1 for 4. So there's a look at some of the guys that haven't played this event well in the past. Let's see. I don't think we're going to do too much more in Fantasy National. Just wanted to get a feel for what I'm sure is going to be a very important metric, and a look at the overview or the umbrella stats, however you want to refer to them, the 4 main off the tee, approach, around the green, putting, all that good stuff. Let me bring this into June 1st in case we want to reference this back a little bit. But let's go ahead, move on to Microsoft Excel, and bring up a couple of files here. Again, this is a comparison course monstrosity that I keep. We'll have to update the Sanderson Farms tomorrow. That is what that line is for. But we'll take a look here at the Shriners, get a feel for it in terms of an overall look. You see that off the tee is supposedly about a tenth of a shot less important than the average PGA Tour event. But keep in mind, it is somewhat important in terms of here in relation to the approach and the putting around the green. So I'll be curious to see, and in fact, let's go ahead and do that. Is there a big outlier here with the Shriners? And yeah, right off the bat, last year, Showdown lineups did really well. Awesome, James. I'm glad to hear it. I know that a couple of the names that we talked about on Twitch Friday morning, like Mackenzie Hughes, went out and blistered the course that Friday afternoon. A couple other players performed very, very well that I was very high on. I know Poston had a good round. He didn't make the cut. Actually, maybe he fell apart at the end. There were a couple of names. Mac Hughes was the big one that I know that we kind of looked at and performed very, very well. So I'm glad to hear that the Showdown lineups did well. Hopefully, for those who did not join that show on Friday morning, hopefully you consider doing so. I had some fun doing it. I will admit that Showdowns aren't my area of expertise, but I will never say no to trying to analyze some data, and I will give you a statistician's view of what I see. So if you're interested in Showdown content, make sure you give me a follow at Twitch, as that's where I'll be doing that content exclusively. But again, James, glad to hear it went well. Glad that I could at least point you in the right direction. Now, whether I was leading you there, that's up to you, but I'm glad I at least pointed you in the right direction. But we come back to analyzing the Shriners here, and you see this is a pretty big outlier in terms of off the tee. If we removed that, then you see off the tee gets much more important. It's still average in terms of the rest of the full field courses, but that is indeed an outlier. Let's see. Any other big outliers here? Yeah. See, putting. Putting's a big outlier in terms of the positive here. You remove that, it's not very important at all, at least in terms of relation to other full field events. So let's go ahead and move through this, see if anything strikes our eye in terms of something that stands out positively or negatively. So again, the four umbrellas or the four main stats look to be all about average. Again, we saw that we removed that outlier, played to about average. Approach still pretty important. Around the green, did not look like it was important in terms of the graphical stuff in Fantasy National. Okay, and again, there's not a lot of high numbers here, so take that for what you will. But it is saying that around the green is more important here than the average full field course. I don't think we're going to do much with around the green. But we also saw that scrambling was players are less successful scrambling here, so there might be something to that. We'll have to investigate that a lot more tomorrow and Tuesday on Twitch. Distance, not much of a factor at all. That's actually pretty close to course average. I mean, you see there's a lot of tournaments like the Mayakoba doesn't matter at all. Valero doesn't matter. Some of these numbers are pretty big, so 0.42 is pretty darn close to course average. Fairways, no. Greens, not really. Again, talking to the size of the greens, it seems like everybody's going to be hitting the greens. So you're going to probably want to look at proximity or putting. Here's something that kind of jumps off to me. Eagles. So we might want to look at Eagles alone. Because that's a fairly large number. You do have, some courses like the Wyndham that's more than a tenth of a shot more important, but this is one of the higher numbers here. So it's probably prudent to look at Eagles alone this week. Full disclosure, I'll probably just put birdies or better, but we might want to take a look at Eagles tomorrow in the data dive, just alone. So we can do that. See, bogeys avoided, not really a factor. You've got to go low. Although it is saying the birdies are less important too. I'm curious to see if there's an outlier there. Birdies, yeah, that one's pretty low. If we removed that one, gets to be a little bit more important. That makes sense. Eagles, is there any big outlier? No, not really. That is just consistent. So probably prudent to look at Eagles by themselves tomorrow. Par threes, they were important in relation to the par fours. So I'm curious to see if there's some outliers again going on. Par fours, I think you can still see that a little bit. So nothing in the par threes stands out. The par fours, no surprise really. It's saying that the 400 to 450 are the most important ones. 6 of the 11 par fours measure to this on the scorecard. So that makes a lot of sense. Par fives, I don't know how I feel about this because it's saying that it is not important at all. So I would have to think there's something going on there. Let's take a look. Par threes, like this is a pretty low outlier. That's a pretty high one. Par fours, that looks to be maybe somewhat low. Par fives, look at that. Yeah, there's a big outlier here in 2019. Like the next lowest is 1.4. This is 0.8. So I'm just going to check this. What's that make it now? A little bit under in terms of full field courses, but much more to average as opposed to where it was. Like this is a huge positive outlier. Interesting. So tomorrow we'll definitely be going through some outlier stuff. If you join me on Twitch, I'll be doing some of that too in prep for the show. Lastly, let's take a look at some proximities here. Like that's a pretty low outlier proximity we could take a look at. 125 to 150 was the most common approach shot in reference or in relation to the average tour event. So 125 to 150. Let me scroll over for you all. There. Nope, that's the Sanderson Farm. Stupid. There you go. So Shriners looks to be pretty important on prox. And it makes a lot of sense because the greens are so big here. 125 to 150. I mean, that's not anywhere close to the highest number. You know, you got a 10.5 at the Sony, an 11 down here at the Byron Nelson. So not the biggest number there. And it looks like the Prox 200 Plus is negative already. Total Prox could be a thing, though, this week. I'm getting a feeling that Total Prox is probably a thing we want to look at for TPC Summerlin. So that's going to be it for that massive file. Let me save it because I've been working with outliers. So now we move to the early look file. And you see, I mean, Patrick Cantlay, 4 events, he's averaged a 3rd place finish. He has just lit this place up since he's basically been on tour. Let's see, Sung Jae, average 10th place finish. He's done it all in off the tee and approach. Matthew Neesmith has played this event well. He's actually putt well here. He's not a very good putter. But he's been doing Matthew Neesmith things. He's all in strokes gained approach. Let's filter out the players that have only played it once, so we get a feel for guys who have played it year over year. Hadwin, we saw that he has played this event well. He's doing Adam Hadwin things, putting it very well. See, Bo Hostler's been all around the green and putting, and yet has played this event very well. Shank, all putting. Hadley, approach and putting. Harmon, all in putting. Interesting to see that. Let's move across here, see if we can't get a feel for some of these other metrics and the guys that have played this event the best. Like distance, and it's okay. I mean, you've got a little bit of distance here, but I mean, Neesmith is very, very poor in distance. Kuchar's never going to be a big hitter, so it's not mandatory here, but I would think it doesn't hurt. Some courses absolutely eliminate distance being a factor. Think of the Honda, think of the RBC Heritage. Like, the distance players there don't matter at all because you have a bunch of forced layups. So when I say distance might not hurt, like, there are players that can hit bombs here and compete. So interesting to see that. Fairways doesn't look like it's very important. I mean, you got Matthew Neesmith seemingly hitting every fairway. But other than that, it's kind of mediocre. Same with the good drives. Greens, I don't think are going to be very important at all, just because of how easy they are to hit. You see the birdies versus the bogeys. I mean, triple there. Sungjae, 1.5 times it. Neesmith, Hadwin, Hosser's basically even. Every single player down to, what's this, Tom Hoagie. So every one of these players that have played it multiple times are at least even or close to even in terms of birdies versus bogeys, or astronomically more important in the birdies. Again, just emphasizes that you have to go low here. You have to go low. So we're going to be looking at some of those same metrics that we did from the Sanderson Farms. Eagles doesn't look like it's very important here, but I still think it's going to be, because these are in relation to other players. And we saw from this sheet here, like Eagles, this is one of the bigger numbers on tour, almost 1/10. So it is going to be a factor. I really think it's going to be a factor. We'll take a look at Eagles alone tomorrow. But again, full disclosure, by the time we get to Wednesday, I'm going to be looking at birdies or better. But we'll look at Eagles alone tomorrow as well. Par 3s, let's just take a look at the top, 20 maybe? See how they fared here. Average of 1.0, not a whole lot here. Par 4s, average of a 3.0, so triple the importance in the than the par 3s, which is interesting because we didn't see that graphically per Fantasy National. Now, some of the difference is I am taking the top 30s here, any player that finishes in the top 30, as opposed to top 10s, 5s, and winners. So that could be a factor of it as well. 400 to 450 par 4s, down to Ryan Palmer. 1.7, 0.3, 0.2. So yeah, it's definitely the 400, 450. You combine all three of the other lengths of par 4s here at TPC Shriners, at least on average, it's still not equaling the 400 to 450. So we're going to put a lot of weight into par 4s in general. We're going to put a lot of emphasis into 400 and 450 as well. Par 5s, let's do the same here. If we had a 1 in the, or 1.0 in the par 3s, 3.0 in the par 4s, down to Ryan Palmer. This is a 0.7. So interesting to see that in terms of strokes gained, par 5s, it's the lowest of the 3s, 4s, and 5s. Wouldn't have guessed that. 0.4, 0.3, and 0. Talking about averages. So interesting to note there. We'll definitely be doing a lot of this tomorrow on Twitch. and for the data dive tomorrow night. Proximity, I'm thinking this is going to be pretty important. You got 65 here, which is a pretty big number in terms of prox total. I'm trying to just get a feel for how, where the green is. Like 200 plus does have some amount of green here. It's also got some red. I don't know. Interesting. That'll be fun research to do tomorrow in terms of getting prepped for the show and looking at former winners here at TPC Summerlin. But again, I think that's going to do it for the initial research show. Let me know in the comments how you did this past week with the Sanderson Farms. James for jumping in chat. Thanks for jumping in chat. I'm glad to hear that the showdown went well. How did your totality of lineups do when you took full field lineups? How were everyone's wagers? Emiliano Grillo is in my doghouse now, being essentially tied for the lead, and then taking a triple on a par 5 killed my day, killed any chance I had of a good weekend. All of my lineups seemed like they were 5 of 6. Poston really hurt me. Henley hurt quite a bit. I felt pretty good about Augusto Nunez, and then he missed the cut on the number. It happens. He was a long shot. So let me know in the comments how you did. For everyone who tuned in and watched, I appreciate you supporting the channel. If you liked what you saw and what you heard, I ask you consider subscribing to the channel. It would help me out a lot. I enjoy providing statistical analysis for all golf content, sports content, betting, and all that stuff. I do enjoy what I do, even if I am quite heavy into the mathematical nerdiness of it. For all of the wagers you made this past week at the Sanderson Farms, for all of your DFS contests you entered this past week at the Sanderson Farms, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.